Hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining in today. Welcome to the webinar, Why Buy Auckland Property Now? Just to give you a bit of background, August is Renovations Property Month, and this is the first of 5 webinars which we're running over coming weeks. Each week we're going to tackle a different property topic, which is going to be hosted by a different property expert. So I do encourage you to stay to the end of the webinar. I'll be putting a list of the topics and the dates so that you can get those into your calendar and you're not going to miss out on any of this free content. Today I'm going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes talking about why buy Auckland property now. There's going to be some questions that you may have, so I do encourage you to pop them into the comment section, and I'll take some time at the end of this to answer all those questions for you. So we're going to dive straight into it. So what I'm sharing with you today, it's basically my thoughts, my opinions based on working in the Auckland property environment. This is not specific advice for you to act on. If you're looking for specific advice, you need to talk to a registered financial advisor. All I'm doing is I'm simply sharing my thoughts and opinions to give you a different perspective and to get you thinking about Auckland property in a different way. So let's continue. So who am I? So some of you will know who I am and who Renovations are. If you don't, my name is Jason Tan and I'm a property wealth coach. I'm very privileged to be working under Renovations, working with investors as well as first home buyers. And we operate a little bit differently from other people in our industry. We're not just educators, but we're actually coaches, meaning that we work alongside our clients on a one-to-one basis. So helping them with our strategy through to finding property, through to buying property, renovating and revaluing. We're there every step of the way. And that way, our members don't make mistakes because you've got an experienced person there that has helped other people do this many times before. You're in very, very good hands. Renovations has been around since 2009, founded by super investor Ron Hui Fong. We're very proud today to have a membership of over 800 lifetime members. Over the past 10 years, we've been very successful in our property purchasing, and we have purchased over 2,000 properties in central Auckland over the past 10 years, and that number is growing every day. So part of today with what I'm sharing about my insights around Auckland are based on the experiences that I've been privy to over the last 10 years. So I'm hoping it'll be very insightful for you. Now, I'm a third generation Kiwi. I've been born and bred in Auckland, and I'm proud to say that I love Auckland City. I've seen it change from being a very small city to where it is now, where it's ranked quite highly on the international stage. And here are some of the media headlines that some of you may have seen about Auckland. Auckland's now ranked as the 8th most livable city in the world. Our quality of life is deemed the 3rd best. And I guess what this alludes to is that Auckland has now grown up and it's on par with a lot of the other major international cities like the Sydneys, like the Londons and Tokyos. The one thing that I will say about Auckland that is no surprise is that our infrastructure hasn't kept up with our growth. And you can feel that, especially if you're a commuter in Auckland trying to get to work or trying to get to the other side of town, where it feels like it's a traffic jam constantly. So that's, I suppose, one of the cons of living in Auckland. But it's a city that I do love, and I know that over time and with the initiatives that we have in place, that's going to improve as we go along. One of the things that I'm most proud of in Auckland is our cultural diversity. I love the fact that we're very, very multicultural, and that's translated really well into our restaurant and dining scene. It used to be that you had to travel overseas to experience international cuisine, but we have that right now here at our doorstep in Auckland. We're also surrounded by some beautiful natural environments. We're very, very close to the ocean, so that's how we've got our nickname, the City of Sails. There's also some fantastic parks and beautiful beaches within minutes drive. So it's a real beautiful place to live in, and the only thing that we can be frustrated about, once again, is our traffic here. This is an interesting study which was done by Auckland City Council in 2017, and what they wanted to do was to look at the numbers that are coming into Auckland on a weekly basis. And the research that they conducted showed that in a typical week in Auckland, 825 new residents land here. That's not just from overseas, but it's also internal migration. And I suppose the reason why that is that Auckland has become the true business capital of New Zealand. A lot of the people that have gone off to university, perhaps in Otago or Waikato or Canterbury, once they graduate, they're all coming to Auckland because this is essentially where the jobs are. You're seeing that also with overseas immigration. Naturally, you're going to land in the city where the jobs are, and that's typically Auckland. What that does, however, though, is that it puts a lot of stress on our housing market. For the 825 people that come in on a weekly basis, we need another 278 houses for them. That's putting a lot of stress on our housing market in Auckland, and predominantly also our rental market, because there's no way that we're providing anywhere close to that. So we're seeing rental demand outstripping rental supply. And probably part of the reason why you haven't seen big spikes here in Auckland is because we've seen interest rates continuously come down, which is essentially like a rental increase. But I see it as a problem which is bubbling away, and things are going to get worse before they get better. How that translates into jobs is we're seeing that we need 472 jobs created every single week. But the worst thing, and the reason why our traffic is not getting any better, is that it's translating to about 769 new cars on the road every single week. Now, there are some projects in Auckland City where we're trying to get people out of cars and onto public transport. We've got the train system, we've got the city rail loop, which is currently being planned and built. So we've got a lot of initiatives to get people out of cars and into public transport. But right now, we're still very heavily reliant on cars. And Auckland is a bit of a standstill at the moment. So it's good signs that Auckland is growing. We just need the infrastructure to keep up. So I did some looking into some of the infrastructure projects, and one of the things that is quite interesting to look at is the work that the Panuku Development Trusts are involved in. Panuku are largely involved in a lot of the rejuvenation of parts of Auckland, and looking at creating hubs outside of the central city. So if you log on to their website, you'll see some of the projects which they're involved in, and there's some great stuff that's happening in Avondale and Onehunga, Dominion and Valley Roads, and in other parts of Auckland like Takapuna. So keep an eye on those areas, because where infrastructure is being developed, that has a really good flow-on effect to the surrounding properties in the area. One of the other things that we have up and coming is we have the defense of the America's Cup. But before the America's Cup, we actually have the Louis Vuitton Challenges. So there's already demand on accommodation in central Auckland. I have heard of scouts coming from overseas, securing properties here for all the competitors as well as their families. So that's going to be putting further strain on our rental accommodation here in Auckland. If anyone remembers back to the last Lions tour, we had our accommodation problem was really highlighted there, where a lot of the tourists were finding it very difficult to secure places to sleep. And I can't remember whether it was Wellington or Christchurch, but one of those cities actually developed a tent park, which housed some of the tourists that came over. So with the America's Cup coming up, that's going to further highlight the lack of accommodation issue that we're facing here in Auckland. One of the interesting developments here in Auckland is the prospect of the unitary plan. What the unitary plan is that the whole of Auckland has been rezoned, and the idea behind it is it's encouraging people to build up, and that's what we need. Like many of the other major cities around the world, it's no longer going out; it's actually all going up. So it's going to be exciting to see how Auckland evolves over the coming years, as there are some of the challenges around construction and financing which haven't allowed the unitary plan to see its full potential right now. As I mentioned, we're also attracting a lot of international artists and shows and so forth, and Auckland is seen as a real destination for these international acts. But one of the other key drivers that I'm looking at when I'm looking at where I should be investing my money is population. The population of New Zealand is forecast to grow to 5 million by 2020. 2 million of that is going to be in Auckland alone, and Auckland's forecast to get to 2 million by 2025. So Auckland is where the population is, and this is where we're quite different to many other countries, where we're quite heavily focused on Auckland versus other cities around the country. Our second biggest city in New Zealand is Wellington, and they're not even 500,000 people yet. So we've got some real challenges coming up here in Auckland to accommodate the demand that there is. Some of the major infrastructure projects which have been signed off, there's a list here, and a really good resource to see what's happening is at interest.co.nz. So some of these projects are underway that you can see there that have been highlighted in the blue, and there are some that have been signed off but have not yet started. The interesting thing here is that there is $74 billion worth of infrastructure projects signed off for Auckland City. So that is very, very significant, because what infrastructure creates is it creates jobs. When you have jobs translates into disposable income. With disposable income, people feel more wealthy, there's more of a propensity to spend, and some of that will flow into housing. So people will then start buying their own homes or buying rental properties. And that's what leads into an increase in property prices, which then takes us back into a boom. So it's quite a cyclical process. So from an investor perspective, I'm really, really excited to know that there's $74 billion being spent in the city that I live and invest in. So I think the future of Auckland is looking very, very bright. The other thing to look at as well is the shortage that is well reported. We have a current shortage, according to the ANZ, of around 70,000 homes. This graph, which was done by the Reserve Bank of New Zealand in 2018, shows a decline in the housing from 1997 through to 2005. You can see that sort of downward trend all the way through to 2005. But then from 2005 to 2016, look how sharp the shortfall becomes. You know, it's quite scary that it's turned so quickly. So what that's translated is in the previous recession in 2007, we had an accommodation surplus of around 50,000. The developers around that time had a strong appetite for building up, and that's when we saw Auckland, a lot of apartments appearing in Auckland, and as a result, we had a surplus of 50,000. Now, fast forward to where we are in the current recession in 2017, which is when it started. We have a shortage of 70,000. So that is a swing of a surplus of 50,000 to 70,000. That is pretty scary stuff, because what that illustrates to me is that the shortage has grown significantly and it continues to grow. So looking at some of the numbers, the growing shortage that we have is indicating that we need another 270 properties a week in central Auckland, and that was further verified by some of the research that had come out of Auckland Council. That translates to 38 a day. Do you think we're building 38 a day? Nowhere near it. So this is an ongoing problem that we're facing here with housing here in Auckland City. On top of that, we also have a reported shortage in skilled labour. We need another 9,000 tradies. That's plumbers, that's builders, that's electricians. So we have a shortage of actually building skilled labour. To further exasperate that, we also have a shortage in construction materials. So the cost of raw materials has rapidly increased. We've seen some really, really strong export markets, and there's been high demand on our raw materials. So we've got a strong export sector that's dealing with countries like China and so forth that have a strong appetite for our timber. But what it's also translated to is it's translated to higher prices locally. And that's why with some of the construction companies that you've seen get into financial strife over the last couple of years, a lot of it has been because of the under forecasting of actually the cost of construction, which is quite likely the cost of construction materials. So that's a real problem that we're facing. Growing housing shortages. So part of this Reserve Bank study, they tracked new dwelling consents from 2017 through to 2019. So the great thing is that you can see that there has been an increase in consents. So in 2017, we had 10,379 consents to where we are in 2019 with just under 14,000. So we've seen a good increase in the number of consents issued. However, it's important to understand also that doesn't necessarily translate into all those consents being built into houses. Even if it did, even if that 13,881 was translated into houses, that is still not enough to reduce the shortage that we're facing. So I'm seeing over the next 10 years that this shortage isn't going to go away anytime soon. One of the common myths that we have around Auckland property is that it's really unaffordable. This is a study done by Pay Scale Research, and they looked at some of the major cities around the globe, and such as Sydney, New York, London, Paris, and they compared Auckland with that. So you can see the average house prices in these cities and the average salaries. And what we have there in the third column is we have the multiple. So you can see probably the most expensive city out of this study is London, where the average property price is about 80 times the average salary. The interesting thing to note on this research is that Auckland is the lowest out of them all, where the average property price is only 16 times the average salary. What people fail to understand that the household makeup is quite different to how it was in my parents' day. I remember back when my father was buying his first house, my father could be the main breadwinner, and my mother could be the stay-at-home mum to raise the family. Now, when you look at the typical household, you'll quite often have mum and dad working, and if the kids are old enough, then they're paying board as well. So the family unit has drastically changed to what it has been in previous decades. We're also seeing that translated into the rental market, where it's no longer single units that are renting properties, but it's actually groups of people that are coming together, such as working professionals, and they're actually renting larger properties collectively together. That allows them to be close to amenities, close to their workplace, because one of the things is that people don't want to travel for hours back and forth, stuck in traffic to get to work. So there's a real drive for people to live in central Auckland properties. One of the things to also understand with property is that there is a rippling effect. So when a property boom starts, it tends to start in central Auckland. So think of the suburbs like the Greylands and the Ponsonbys. Those are the areas which tend to rise in value first. From there seems to be a flow-on effect to the outer suburbs, which then eventually stretches out throughout Auckland. It does go throughout Auckland and it starts hitting the regions, Hamilton and then Tauranga, Wellington and then further afield. But you've got to think of the ripple effect like the rubber band effect. It does what goes out also comes back in. So you see that the regions are a lot more susceptible to the up and down fluctuations compared to Auckland, which spends a lot more time in the boom of a property cycle. So Auckland is a lot more insulated than other parts of the country when it comes to property. Money, money, money. We all saw the announcement last week from the OCR, from the Reserve Bank. The OCR rate is now 1%, and I think it really surprised people. People weren't expecting it to drop by 50 basis points. So the OCR at 1% is starting to translate into lower interest rates from the main banks. So you can see the rates from today, which I got off interest.co.nz. Some of the really sharp rates coming from the major banks. ANZ 3.69 for 1 year, ASB 3.75, BNZ 3.75. And the trend of the interest rates as well is that there's a general sentiment that it's going to continue coming down. The interest rates are there to stimulate business confidence, which we know is at a bit of a low at the moment. So it's going to be good for housing as well. So I think over the next 6 to 12 months, I think you're going to see a little bit more interest in the property market, because the people that aren't benefiting from the low interest rates are your traditional savers, which are your baby boomers that like to have money in the bank. What they're seeing is their retirement savings getting lesser and lesser returns. So you'll probably see some of those people jumping into the property market over the next 6 to 12 months. The good thing about low interest rates is that effectively it is a rental increase. So as interest rates come down, the cost of money is cheaper. So there hasn't been the need to increase rents. We've seen a few changes in housing with the removal of tax losses, with the ring fencing of losses. We've seen extra costs onto landlords, such as insulation and also heating appliances. But what we haven't seen so far is a transfer of those costs onto the tenant. And I believe that a lot of that is due to the fact that the cost of money has become cheaper. Now, what you will notice is that interest rates and rents are symbiotic, meaning that as interest rates increase, so do rental increases happen as well. So that doesn't happen across all regions, and it's not true for all properties. So the closer you are to the middle, where the demand is, then you have a greater propensity to increase rents as interest rates increase. So I think that when you eventually see increases in the interest rate, I think you will see that that's going to be followed by increases in rental prices as well. And that's going to be further exacerbated by the shortage that we have in accommodation. So I hope that gives you some great insights into why Auckland. We're going to be sharing a lot more about Auckland and some of the examples of what people have been achieving in the Auckland property market at a workshop which we're running on the 14th of September. But prior to that, we are running a number of webinars, as I mentioned at the beginning of this one. So the next one that's coming up is going to be on the 19th of August, and that's going to be presented by Carl Wu. And he's going to be talking about cash flow and capital growth, the pros and cons of both. And on 26th of August, Angela is going to be talking about why property and why now. On the 2nd of September, Lara is going to be exploring good debt versus bad debt. And on the 9th of September, Lynn's going to be talking about property as an overview and going to tie everything up. So please lock those dates in. We'll be sharing more information on our renovations page as they come up. But thank you for tuning in today, and I look forward to reading your questions and to answering you back at the end of this webinar. Thanks, and happy investing. Bye for now.